Good evening, Madam President. I do not have any questions. I just would like to make a statement. Madam President, I am deeply concerned, as has been spoken to already quite a bit this evening, about this bill before us. I'm deeply concerned because we live in a land where we have seen generations of Americans who were born here and those who came to our shores and legally immigrated into our country, who have fought and continue to fight for our freedom. I'm deeply concerned because while our freedom is precious, it is not free. Our freedom requires rules, laws, and rights, something our founding fathers realized was crucial to the success of our freedom and our nation. And while many have immigrated legally into our country, the greatest nation in the world, and who live in our great state, we find ourselves at this very moment considering significant changes to our state laws, changes that protect those who have not immigrated legally, people who are in our country, our great nation, our great state, illegally. To me, some of the most egregious parts of this bill affords more protection to people who are here illegally and to the crimes they commit and their breaking of the law than to that of a legal citizen. And I have to ask why we are so compelled to protect people who are in our country illegally. I would wager a guess that the overwhelming majority of the senators around this circle have ancestors who immigrated legally into this country. My ancestors came to the United States from Italy and Germany nearly 100 years ago in search of the American dream. They came through Ellis Island like millions of others. They followed the rules. They followed the laws. They were proud to become legal American citizens. I recall my late grandmother telling me many years ago with tears in her eyes about her brother who was turned away at Ellis Island and sent back to Italy because he did not meet the requirements for immigration to the United States, and she never saw him again. But these immigrants from 100 years ago and right through today, they followed the process, they followed the law, they followed the rules to become a legal citizen of the United States of America. Recently, I celebrated the legal immigration of a colleague as he became a legal U.S. citizen. He and millions of others before him proudly became citizens and took the oath of allegiance, which, Madam President, in part reads, "I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen, and that I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same." Madam President, the oath of allegiance is not optional. In order to become a citizen, one of the requirements for naturalization is to show attachment to the principles of the United States Constitution and to be favorable, quote, to the good order and happiness of the United States. Again, this is shown by taking the oath of allegiance to the United States. If a person is unwilling to take the oath in whole or part, they are not eligible to become a citizen. Yet here we are in this moment, looking to protect those people in our great nation who have never taken this oath, who are knowingly here illegally. Why would we do this? I'm dumbfounded. In a further aberration of the laws that protect our freedom, this bill removes, as has been spoken to many times already, some of the authority of our sworn law enforcement officers to uphold the immigration laws of the United States. More specifically, this bill actually restricts the ability of a sworn law enforcement officer to notify the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency of the arrest and the detainment of a person who is in our country illegally and who has committed a crime. Madam President, I believe this bill is more about criminals. By definition, the person who is here illegally is a criminal, living in the United States illegally, breaking the immigration laws of our country. But this bill goes much further than that. This bill, again, as has been spoken to many times already, expands the definition of a civil immigration detainer and prohibits law enforcement officers from detaining someone pursuant to such a detainer unless it is accompanied by a judicial warrant. which I understand is one signed by any state or federal judge other than an immigration judge. And under current law, this person can be detained. Under current law, this person can be detained without a judicial warrant. Let's remember, this is a person who has been arrested for committing a crime. This bill establishes new procedures that law enforcement officers must follow when responding to these detainers, placing additional restrictions on how the actions they may take, and eliminating current law's requirement that they consider specific public safety and risk factors. Why would we remove consideration of public safety and risk factors from the use of immigration detainers? Isn't the protection of public safety paramount to the freedoms we enjoy in our great nation? This bill limits the circumstances under which law enforcement officers may disclose an individual's confidential information to a federal immigration authority. Why? Why? The freedoms we enjoy, the security of our neighborhoods, the protections provided by the Constitution of the United States all rely on the interfacing of local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies to work together. It does not work when we try to limit that interaction and dilute the authority of these agencies that we entrust to uphold the laws of our land. But then, in extreme contrast, this bill deems law enforcement agency records relating to U.S. immigration and customs enforcement access as public under the Freedom of Information Act. So let's just make sure we're clear. We're going to protect the public information about what law enforcement can disclose about an individual to a federal immigration authority, but we're going to make all of the records of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office completely accessible under the Freedom of Information Act. Freedom of Information Act. Bewildering to me. And I ask again, why would we do this? Just a moment ago, Senator Huang spoke to lines 101 through 114. Okay? But I think it's important that that I restate those again. We are talking about the removal of the details of conditions by which a person here illegally may be detained. Again, convicted of a felony, removed, cannot be detained. Subject to pending criminal charges in this state where bond has not been posted. Removed, cannot be detained. Has an outstanding warrant for arrest in this state. Removed, cannot be detained. Is identified as a known gang member in the database of the National Crime Information Center or any similar database. Removed, cannot be detained. Is designated as a security risk group member or a security risk group safety threat member by the Department of Correction. Removed, cannot be detained. Is identified as a possible match in the federal terrorist screening database or similar database. Removed, cannot be detained. Is subject to a final order of deportation or removal issued by a federal immigration authority. Removed, cannot be detained. And presents an unacceptable risk to public safety as defined and determined by the law enforcement officer. Removed, cannot be detained. Madam President, I remain deeply concerned. I remain deeply concerned because we live in a land, again, where we have seen generations of Americans who were born here and those who have immigrated here and came to our shores legally, who have fought and continue to fight for our freedom and are having their freedom challenged tonight by the dilution of laws that are intended to protect their freedom. Our freedom is not free. And yet, while many have immigrated legally into our country, the greatest nation in the world, we find ourselves at this moment considering significant changes to our laws that protect those who have not immigrated legally. Madam President, people who are in our country, our great nation, illegally, people who, with passage of this bill, are exempted from the lawful application of immigration laws, that are exempted from the laws for crimes they commit, which are, in reality, the very protections provided to all of us so that we can be a free nation. Madam President, I ask each senator around this circle, why are we so compelled to protect people who are in our country illegally? Why are we so compelled to restrict law enforcement agencies and officers in the performance of their duties? This is a dangerous and slippery slope we stand upon tonight. I cannot support this legislation. I urge my colleagues to reject this legislation, to truly understand how dangerous this legislation is to every legal citizen of the United States and to the great state of Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Berthel.